The hum of the aircraft filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats. Anna Moretti walked briskly down the aisle, scanning the business class section with the meticulous gaze of someone who had seen it all. Her uniform was impeccable, pressed to perfection, her Skylux Airlines pin gleaming under the overhead lights. She had worked in aviation for over 20 years, and in her mind, she had earned the right to impose order without question. So when she spotted the two young boys sitting alone in 3A and 3B, she immediately felt a prickle of irritation. Children traveling alone. Wonderful. Lucas and Leo Carter sat side by side, their faces lit with excitement as they fumbled with their seatbelts. They were dressed in simple but clean clothes, Lucas in a navy hoodie and Leo in a gray sweater. Their identical features made it impossible to tell them apart, except for the fact that Lucas seemed slightly more restless, his fingers tapping against the armrest. Anna approached them with a tight-lipped smile, the kind that barely reached her eyes. "Where are your parents?" Leo looked up at her, blinking. "Our mom's not here. We're flying alone." Anna's expression hardened. "Do you have an adult supervising you?" Lucas held up a lanyard with a small laminated card that read "Unaccompanied Minor" in bold letters. "We have these. Mom said you guys would take care of us." Anna exhaled sharply. Of course she did. Babysitting entitled little brats who thought the world revolved around them. "Just don't cause any trouble," she snapped, snatching the lanyard from Lucas's hand to inspect it. The boy flinched at her abruptness but said nothing. The passengers around them glanced at the exchange, but Anna ignored them. She had dealt with far worse than a couple of boys who didn't know their place. A small mistake, a big problem. 30 minutes into the flight, the meal service began. Anna moved efficiently through the aisle, distributing trays with the mechanical precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times. When she reached the Carter twins, she set their trays down with little ceremony. "Chicken or pasta?" "Chicken, please," Lucas said enthusiastically. Anna placed the foil-covered dish in front of him. Just as she turned away, it happened. Lucas, in his excitement, reached for his cup of apple juice too quickly. His elbow knocked it over, sending the golden liquid splashing across the tray table and onto his lap. "Oh no!" he gasped, his hands flying to his pants, now drenched in sticky juice. Leo immediately grabbed a napkin, trying to help, but before they could do anything, Anna was there. "Unbelievable!" Her voice was sharp enough to make Lucas freeze. She yanked a napkin from the service cart and pressed it onto the tray table with unnecessary force. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be in business class." Lucas's face burned with embarrassment. I am sorry, it was an accident." "Accidents happen when you don't pay attention," Anna cut him off coldly. Leo frowned, sensing the unfairness in her tone. "It wasn't a big deal, we can clean it." "Enough." Anna's patience snapped. Before she could think, she grabbed Lucas's wrist and smacked the back of his hand, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make a point. "Learn to behave." Lucas sucked in a breath. He wasn't crying, but his face was a mix of shock and humiliation. He pulled his hand back quickly, staring at Anna with wide eyes. Leo, however, reacted immediately. "You hit him." His voice rose with indignation. A murmur rippled through the cabin. A businessman in 4C lowered his newspaper. A woman in 2A turned her head slightly. A couple sitting in 5D exchanged glances. "Did she just slap him?" someone whispered. Anna felt a flicker of unease. Perhaps she had overstepped, but she refused to back down. "He needs to learn some discipline," she said coolly, crossing her arms. Leo's small hands curled into fists. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Enough." Anna's tone dropped dangerously. Her voice carried authority, but this time, it didn't land the way she expected. Instead of silencing the boys, it only amplified the tension. A few rows ahead, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer blazer stood up. At first, Anna didn't register who she was. But the moment the woman turned, locking eyes with her, Anna's stomach clenched. Helena Carter, the CEO of Skylux Airlines. Anna's breath caught. "No, it can't be." The blonde woman moved gracefully but with undeniable command. She walked toward them, stopping just a few inches away from Anna. Her voice was calm. "Deceptively so. You just assaulted my children." A chill ran down Anna's spine. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder. A phone screen in the back row lit up. Someone was recording. I didn't. On my airline, Helena continued, her blue eyes now ice-cold. On my watch. Anna's mouth went dry. Helena turned to Lucas and Leo, her expression softening instantly. Are you okay, sweethearts? Lucas, still stunned, nodded weakly. Leo, however, gripped his mother's hand, his little body tense. She hit Lucas, Mom. For no reason. Helena inhaled sharply. When she turned back to Anna, there was no warmth left in her gaze. Captain. A flight attendant near the cockpit immediately turned to inform the captain. Anna's stomach twisted. This can't be happening. Her mind raced for a way out. Maybe if she apologized. Maybe if she said she was just trying to. You are dismissed from this flight, Helena said, her voice unwavering. Anna's eyes widened. You can't do that. Helena raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. I own this airline. I can do whatever I want. The whispers turned into full conversations. The businessman in 4C shook his head in disgust. The couple in 5D muttered something about calling the airline's complaint line. The phone screen in the back row was still recording. Anna felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Fear. As the flight crew approached her, she realized there was no escaping this. She had made the worst mistake of her life. A suffocating silence settled over the cabin. The passengers of Flight 216 had gone from quiet observers to active witnesses, eyes darting between Anna and Helena Carter. The weight of what had just happened was undeniable. Anna had struck a child, a passenger, and not just any child. The CEO's son. Anna's pulse pounded in her ears. Her mind screamed at her to fix it, now. This is a misunderstanding, she started, her voice cracking slightly. Helena didn't even blink. I saw everything, Ms. Moretti. And so did half this cabin. Anna's throat tightened. I was just trying to maintain order. Order. Helena's voice was deceptively calm. She gestured toward Lucas, who was still frozen in his seat, his hands balled into fists on his lap. Does this look like order to you? A 10-year-old boy terrified because a flight attendant put her hands on him? Anna swallowed hard. It was just a reflex. No, it was a choice. Helena's words cut through the air like a blade. A murmur of agreement spread among the passengers. Someone in row 6 whispered, she should be fired on the spot. Another voice chimed in, that was completely unacceptable. Anna's stomach churned. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. Then came the final blow. A firm voice sounded over the intercom. Ms. Moretti, please report to the cockpit immediately. The captain. A cold sweat broke out at the back of Anna's neck. The last thing she wanted was to face Captain Reynolds, a no-nonsense pilot who did not tolerate crew misconduct. She turned to Helena, desperation creeping into her tone. Look, Mrs. Carter. Ms. Carter, Helena corrected smoothly. And if I were you, I'd start walking. Anna hesitated. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, burning with judgment. With a stiff nod, she turned and made her way toward the cockpit, her legs heavy as lead. The captain's verdict. The cockpit door shut behind her with a soft click, but the tension inside was anything but quiet. Captain Daniel Reynolds sat in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. His co-pilot, Melissa Haynes, stood to the side, her expression unreadable. Anna tried to keep her voice steady. Captain, Sit down. It wasn't a request. Anna obeyed, sinking into the jump seat near the door. Reynolds exhaled through his nose, then fixed his piercing blue eyes on her. We have a situation. Anna stiffened. I understand that it looked bad, but it didn't look bad. It was bad. His words struck like a slap. I have multiple reports from passengers and crew that you put your hands on an unaccompanied minor. That alone is a violation of company policy. But the fact that the minor in question is the CEO's child? Melissa, the co-pilot, finally spoke. The passengers are filming. Some of those videos are already online. Anna's blood ran cold. What? Reynolds leaned forward. You have no idea how much damage you've just caused. The moment we land, This plane is going to be met by corporate. And trust me, Skylux's legal team is not going to be on your side. Anna's fingers clenched into fists. You're really taking their word over mine? Reynolds's eyes narrowed. Anna, there are videos. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, the reality of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't something she could smooth over. This wasn't going to go away. And then Reynolds delivered the final, crushing order. Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. Return to your jump seat. You are not to interact with passengers again. Anna's body went rigid. You're benching me? I'm protecting what little dignity you have left, Reynolds shot back. A wave of humiliation surged through Anna. 20 years in aviation, and now she was being treated like an incompetent rookie. She rose to her feet, her face burning. Without another word, she left the cockpit, stepping back into a cabin that now felt more like a courtroom. Public judgment. The moment Anna re-entered the cabin, the atmosphere was different. Passengers weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. She saw the way their eyes flicked toward her. Some were angry. Others were disgusted. And the worst ones, the ones who just looked disappointed. A woman in 5A, a mother traveling with her daughter, gave Anna a long, hard stare before shaking her head in silent condemnation. A businessman in 4C crossed his arms. You should be ashamed of yourself. Anna ignored him, moving quickly toward the galley in the back, her body stiff. She had never felt so small. The final blow. Just as she reached the back of the plane, a flight attendant rushed toward her, holding up a phone. Anna, you need to see this. Anna snatched the phone, her hands clammy. It was a video. One of the passengers had uploaded it just minutes ago. The title read, Skylux Airlines flight attendant slaps a child. Disgusting behavior caught on camera. Anna tapped play. And there it was. The entire scene, crystal clear. The spilled juice. Her sharp reprimand. The moment her hand connected with Lucas's wrist. The horrified look on his face. The caption beneath the video already had thousands of comments. Fire her immediately. If this is how Skylux treats kids, I'll never fly with them again. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Anna's breath came fast and shallow. Her career, her reputation, everything was falling apart in real time. She gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. And then she heard it. A notification ping. Another video upload. And this time, the title was even worse. Skylux Airlines flight attendant attacks a CEO's son. Lawsuit incoming. The cabin felt like it was closing in on her. For the first time since this nightmare began, Anna Moretti felt real fear. Anna sat stiffly in the galley, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The distant hum of the aircraft did nothing to drown out the whispers, the judgmental stares, the damning reality that her career was collapsing around her. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the airline's internal communication system. Suspension pending investigation. Anna's stomach twisted. It was happening too fast. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but the memory of that video kept replaying in her mind. The slap. The passengers' reactions. Helena Carter's ice-cold fury. And then, a sharp, panicked cry from the front of the cabin. Anna's head snapped up. Passengers turned toward row 3, where the Carter twins were seated. Lucas was slumped forward, his body trembling. Leo shook his brother's arm desperately. Lucas. Lucas, what's wrong? Helena bolted from her seat. Lucas. A flight attendant rushed forward, but before she could reach them, Anna's instincts kicked in. Years of experience, of handling medical situations at 30,000 feet, overpowered the fear gripping her chest. She ran forward. Lucas was shaking uncontrollably, his breathing erratic, his eyes glassy. His fingers curled into his hoodie, gripping the fabric tightly. His skin was damp with sweat. He's having an episode. Leo's voice was high-pitched, frantic. Helena knelt beside them, her face stricken with terror. Oh God, his medication. Anna felt her blood turn to ice. Medication. He has a neurological condition, Helena said sharply, rummaging through Lucas's backpack. Her hands were shaking. "I gave you his medical forms before the flight. He needs his medication now." Anna's stomach dropped. Medical forms. She had received a stack of paperwork before the flight, standard procedure for unaccompanied minors. She had barely skimmed them, assuming it was just routine information. She hadn't read the details. And now Lucas Carter, the CEO's son, was having a medical crisis at 30,000 feet. Passengers gasped. Someone called out, "What's happening?" A man in the back row stood up. "I'm a doctor. Let me through." Anna stumbled backward as the doctor pushed past her, kneeling next to Helena. He checked Lucas's pulse, his breathing, his pupils. Then he turned to Helena, his face grave. "How long has he been without his medication?" Helena's breath came out shaky. "He was supposed to take it before the flight. But if he's stressed or frightened, it can trigger an episode." Anna's chest constricted. The slap. The humiliation. The sheer terror in the boy's eyes when she grabbed his wrist. Had she triggered this? Helena found the small bottle of pills in Lucas's bag. Her hands trembled as she fumbled to open it. But Lucas's fingers were clenched into fists, his muscles stiff, his breathing shallow. "He's locking up," the doctor said urgently. "We need to get this into his system now." Leo, still gripping his brother's sleeve, turned and glared directly at Anna. His 10-year-old voice was sharp and cut through the chaos like a blade. "You did this." Anna's entire body went cold. The breaking point. Helena managed to get Lucas to swallow the pill, rubbing his back as she whispered reassurances. The doctor kept checking his vitals, waiting for his condition to stabilize. The entire cabin was silent. Watching. Judging. Anna stood there, frozen. Then Helena looked up. And her voice was no longer controlled. No longer calm. "You ignored his medical file?" Anna couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Helena rose slowly, her hands still shaking, but her fury was absolute. "Did you even read it?" Anna opened her mouth. Closed it. Helena's eyes flashed with something darker than anger. "Did you even bother to check what kind of care my son needed before treating him like a problem?" Anna tried to form words, but her throat was dry. Passengers were still watching. Cameras were still recording. The businessman in row 4 scoffed. "Disgusting." A woman near the window muttered, "She should be fired on the spot." Then Helena turned to the flight crew. Her voice was sharp, commanding. "Call the corporate office. Right now. I want her terminated before we land." Anna's breath hitched. "Wait, please." Helena's tone was lethal. "You don't get to beg." A flight attendant near the front picked up the intercom and contacted the airline's headquarters. Passengers started clapping. Anna's face burned with humiliation. Then, the doctor spoke again. "His vitals are stabilizing. He should be okay once we land." Helena let out a slow breath of relief, brushing Lucas's damp curls away from his forehead. Leo still hadn't stopped glaring at Anna. Anna stepped backward, her vision blurring. 20 years. 20 years of discipline, structure, control, gone. She had always believed herself to be untouchable. But now, she was nothing. Passengers clapped again, but not for her. They were celebrating her downfall. And for the first time in her life, Anna Moretti felt truly powerless. The wheels touched down on the tarmac with a heavy thud. Denver International Airport. An unscheduled landing. Passengers murmured, exchanging glances. Everyone knew this wasn't normal. Anna sat in the back galley, her arms wrapped around herself, her nails digging into her palms. The moment she heard the landing announcement, she knew. Her career was over. She peeked through the curtain separating the galley from the cabin. Helena Carter hadn't moved from her son's side. Lucas was still pale, but his breathing was even now. Leo sat beside him, eyes burning with quiet anger. And then Anna's gaze landed on the passengers. Their expressions were clear. Disgust, judgment, relief that she was about to face what she deserved. She swallowed. The doors hadn't even opened yet, and she already felt exiled. Then, the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've made an unscheduled landing at Denver International Airport. We appreciate your patience." Local authorities and Skylux corporate representatives will be boarding shortly. We ask that all passengers remain seated." Anna's stomach dropped. Local authorities. She felt the blood drain from her face. The walk of shame. A few minutes later, the aircraft door opened. 2 airport security officers stepped inside, followed by a woman in a tailored navy suit, Skylux's regional director. Every passenger turned to watch. Anna wanted to disappear. The director scanned the cabin, her expression unreadable. Then she locked eyes with Anna. "Ms. Moretti, come with me." A whisper spread through the cabin. Someone in the back actually laughed. Anna stood up, but her legs felt weak. She knew people were filming. Phones were subtly pointed in her direction. This moment, her walk of shame, would be all over social media within the hour. She had no choice but to move. As she walked down the aisle, the humiliation grew. The woman in 5A shook her head. The businessman in 4C muttered, "Good riddance." Even a flight attendant, someone from her own crew, avoided eye contact, her lips pressed into a tight line. Then, as she passed row 3, Leo spoke. "Are you scared now?" Anna flinched. She turned her head slightly and met his stare. His small face was serious. His voice steady. "Because my brother was scared too." Helena reached out, gently resting a hand on Leo's shoulder. Anna wanted to say something. Anything. But she had nothing to say. She turned away and kept walking. The terminal. As soon as she stepped into the jet bridge, she saw them. Skylux corporate executives. 2 lawyers. A representative from HR reporters. Reporters. Her breath caught. Through the glass walls of the terminal, she saw a crowd of journalists gathered near the gate. Oh God. This is already in the news. A woman in a Skylux blazer stepped forward. "Ms. Moretti, your employment has been formally terminated, effective immediately. You will not be permitted on another Skylux aircraft in any capacity." Anna felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. "Wait, you can't. A full investigation is underway," the woman continued coldly. "But based on passenger reports, video evidence, and the testimony of Ms. Carter, your actions were in direct violation of company policy." Anna's mouth went dry. The woman handed her an envelope. "These are your formal termination papers. We recommend you retain legal counsel." Anna took the envelope with shaking hands. A security officer stepped closer. "You'll need to exit the airport immediately." Her heart pounded. She turned back toward the plane, toward the cabin she had once ruled with confidence. But the doors were closed. And she was on the outside. The social media storm. By the time Anna stepped out of the restricted area, she could already hear the chatter. "It's her. That's the flight attendant who hit the CEO's kid. They fired her, right? She's done." A notification buzzed from her phone. She hesitated, then pulled it out of her pocket. And there it was. #FireAnnaMoretti was trending. She clicked on one of the posts. A video. The same one from the plane. But now, it had over 3 million views. The comments were brutal. "Imagine being this cruel to a child. Skylux had better do something fast, or I'm never flying with them again. She didn't just hit a kid, she ignored his medical condition. Fire her. Someone find out where she works next so we make sure she never gets hired again." Anna's hands shook. This wasn't just about losing her job. This was bigger. She had become a symbol of everything wrong with airline service. She wasn't just fired, she was publicly disgraced. And it was only getting worse. She tried to take a step forward, but it felt like the entire airport was watching her. Watching her fall. She had spent 20 years believing she was untouchable. Now, she was just another name on the internet, dragged through the mud. And for the first time in her life, Anna Moretti had to ask herself a question she had never considered before. What happens when there's no way to fix what you've done? 2 weeks later, Anna Moretti sat at the small, round table in her kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. Her apartment, once immaculate, now felt smaller, colder. The curtains were drawn, shutting out the world. Not that it mattered. The world had already shut her out first. She reached for her phone out of habit, then hesitated. She shouldn't look, but the temptation was too strong. With a deep breath, she unlocked the screen. The first notification hit her like a punch to the stomach. #FireAnnaMoretti, 6.3M tweets. She exhaled shakily, scrolling. It was worse than before. News articles, think pieces, video compilations dissecting every second of her career-ending mistake. And the worst part? There was no escape. Every job application she sent came back with the same response. "Thank you for your interest, but we are pursuing other candidates." Every interview ended the same way. "Unfortunately, given recent events, we don't believe you'd be a good fit." She had worked in aviation for 20 years. And now, she couldn't even get a job at an airport cafe. The world had moved on. But not from her mistake. And she knew it never would. Helena's next move. Across town, in a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Helena Carter watched the latest press briefing. A Skylux spokesperson stood behind a podium, addressing a room full of reporters. Skylux Airlines has completed its internal review. We are implementing new mandatory training programs focused on bias awareness and passenger care. This will ensure that no child, or any passenger, ever experiences what Lucas Carter endured on Flight 216. Helena leaned back in her chair. The public pressure had been relentless. She could have sued Skylux into oblivion if she wanted. But in the end, she chose something bigger. Systemic change. She had made sure of it. Mandatory retraining. Passenger rights reforms. Anonymous reporting channels for complaints. Real change, not just damage control. But that wasn't all. She looked down at a printed legal document on her desk. Her lawyers had advised her against it. Said it wasn't necessary. But Helena didn't care. Some things needed to be permanent. She picked up her pen and signed the paper. Anna Moretti was now officially blacklisted from ever working in the airline industry again. Helena exhaled. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure she could never hurt another child again. Lucas and Leo. That evening, Helena sat on the couch at home, watching as her sons played quietly on the floor. Lucas was different now. Still sweet. Still curious. But quieter. The flight had changed him. Helena knew it would take time for him to feel safe again. Leo, however, was as fiery as ever. He had always been the more outspoken one. And now, he seemed even more protective of his brother. Helena smiled softly. "You okay, sweetheart?" Leo looked up. "I just don't get it." She tilted her head. "What don't you get?" Leo frowned. "Why was she so mean to us?" Helena sighed. "Some people see others as less than them, just because of who they are. It's wrong, but it happens." Leo thought for a moment. Then he asked something she wasn't expecting. "Do you think she's sorry?" Helena hesitated. Then she answered honestly. "I don't know. But even if she is, some things can't be undone." Leo nodded, seeming to accept that. Then he turned to Lucas, nudging his brother's arm. "Hey, wanna build a new Lego ship?" Lucas looked up. For the first time in days, he smiled. "Yeah." Helena watched them play, her heart full. She couldn't protect them from everything. But she had made sure they would never be powerless again. Anna's final lesson. That night, Anna lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to admit the truth. She had been wrong. Not just for slapping Lucas. Not just for ignoring his medical condition. She had been wrong her whole life. She had spent 2 decades believing authority meant control. That power meant never having to explain yourself. But in the end, she had no power at all. She reached for her phone one last time. A message request sat at the top of her inbox. From an unknown number. Anna hesitated, then opened it. "Do you regret it?" No name. No context. But Anna didn't need one. She knew exactly who it was. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could lie. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say she had been unfairly punished. But for once, Anna Moretti did something she had never done before. She told the truth. Yes. She hit send. For the first time since that flight, she closed her eyes and felt the weight of everything she had lost. Because she finally understood. Some mistakes can never be undone. And some people never get a second chance.